Hello, everyone.
Hi again. In the Proclaimer's book, page 198, still in the chapter, they are no part of the world. And we've seen very clearly so far that no part of the world for Jehovah's Witnesses tends to mean no politics, no war. Mm-hmm. And here they have a subsection called Their Position Clearly Stated. After Jehovah's Witnesses had endured grueling tests of their Christian neutrality for many years, the Watchtower of November 1, 1979, reaffirmed their position. Notice it's 100 years in here. Mm-hmm. 100 years since what the Watchtower began. They reaffirmed their position. It also explained what accounted for the action taken by individual witnesses when it said, as a result of diligent study of God's Word, these young Christians were able to make a decision. No one else made this decision for them. They were able to make it individually on the basis of each one's Bible-trained conscience. Their decision was to refrain from acts of hatred and violence against their fellow men of other nations. Yes, they believed in and wanted to share in the fulfillment of Isaiah's well-known prophecy. They will have to beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning shears. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn war any more. Isaiah 2:4. Quite familiar, right? Mm-hmm. These young men of all nations did just that. And that's the end of the quote from the 1979 Watchtower.
During the years that their adherence to Christian neutrality was being put to the test, re-examination of what the Bible says at Romans 13, 1-7, about the superior authorities led to a clearer statement of the witnesses' relationship to secular governments. This was published in the Watchtower issues of November 1st, November 15, and December 1 of 1962, and was reaffirmed in the issue of November 1st, 1990. Those articles emphasized the position of Jehovah God as the supreme one, which also pointed out that secular rulers are superior authorities, only in relation to other humans, and in the sphere of activity in which God permits them to function in the present system of things. The articles showed the need for true Christians conscientiously to honor such secular rulers and to render obedience to them in all matters that do not conflict with God's law and their Bible-trained conscience. Firm adherence to these Bible standards by Jehovah's Witnesses has earned them a reputation for separateness from the world that reminds people of the early Christians.
I don't know what we can say except, again, rewriting history to suit their modern narrative as to the gradual light that they've received from God over the decades of, well, now 150 years, virtually. And this is a good example, though, of them hiding the necessary facts for you to make a proper, to get a proper understanding of this, what you call Bible-trained conscience.
Yeah.
What was the Bible-trained conscience that they had between Russell's era and 1962, which they clearly date here as the big difference?
Yeah.
They say they got, in that date, 1962, a clearer statement in respect to their relationship to the superior authorities. What's the problem with this rewriting of history?
This is just not true. It gives you the impression that they just, fine-tuned it or something. They reversed their position. And I knew nothing of this when I was a witness. That at one point you had the understanding that you now have Russell presented.
Yeah.
But then Rutherford said no. The superior authorities are God and Christ. And they went with that. And so to say that people, even in the first paragraph where it says they were able to make individually on the basis of each one's Bible-trained conscience is a lie. They aren't basing it on their own Bible conscience, because if you disagreed, if your conscience said you could go to war, you'd be disfellowshipped, you'd be out. You wouldn't be a witness anymore. So You're not allowed to have a conscience. You have really an organization conscience.
So in 1962, it wasn't a clearer statement, i.e. light gets brighter and brighter. It
No.
was a double reverse. This
Yeah.
is the second time they'd reversed their position.
Yeah. So you had light, then you went into darkness, and then you got light again.
So this misapprehension that they're trying to obviously double down on here, that they're the only ones who are separate from the world in this respect because they're the only ones that have a Bible-trained conscience. I was greatly drawn to the Watchtower because of what I perceived to be their committed pacifism. But the very first time I went out in field service, I was with my study conductor, his name was Bob, and the only overseer, because in those days, 1970-71, we only had one overseer. He was the congregation overseer, and the elder arrangement came in a year or two later. So Ron, I was out, and I was really pleased because I was very impressed by Ron's Bible ability. He could really thumb his way through the Bible. He was a man probably in his mid to late 50s at this point. And he was very impressive on that. He could give a good public talk too. So I was very pleased to be with him and able to talk to him for the first time. So I told him over coffee during it was a cold day, so we went for coffee probably early. My first time in field service. I wasn't baptized. And I said to him to make conversation, I was so impressed. This is the reason I wanted to get to know Jehovah's Witnesses better, because even as a teenager, when I was a hippie, more or less, and Ron had seen me, by the way, as a hippie. He had seen me with my long hair coming to the Kingdom Hall for the first time in the first months. Now I didn't have long hair because I had to go out in field service, right? So no doubt he was pleased with my progress. But as soon as I opened my mouth to say the thing that really drew me to Jehovah's Witnesses was their pacifism, Ron immediately jumped on that. Said, he was a nice guy, generally. He was very easy to talk to. But on that one, he jumped like, oh, no, we're not pacifists. And then he paused and said, if the society, and in those days we called the organization the society, not the organization. If the society told me tomorrow to take up my sword, I would.
That's
And I
scary.
was stunned by that. And I should have been.
Yeah.
Because that would be absolutely contrary to what you're trying to state as the case here, that people's Bible-trained conscience is what forces them to take the stands they're doing. No, Ron was basically saying that I'm an obedient servant of the Watchtower Society.
Yeah.
Which we know is true now. I should have got more serious about studying that issue before I committed myself and dedicated myself to Jehovah that summer and got baptized.
But then you wouldn't have met me.
That's true. That's true. That was a year or two in the future, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Ron straightened me out right away on the real situation, which is Jehovah's Witnesses do what they do because of obedience to and loyalty to an organization.
Yeah.
Not a Bible-trained conscience.
Yeah. You've let them be your conscience. And so whatever they say goes. And I mean, even in recent years, they've made statements like you obey whether you understand or not.
Yeah.
You still should obey them because they're God's channel. They're God's FDS. You know, your conscience goes out the window then when you say, I have to obey them because of who they are.
And even your application here of Isaiah 2:4, as glorious as that text is, nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn war anymore. But that's a prophecy of the kingdom in the future, after the return of Messiah. In the meantime, we have to deal with the Romans 13 principle, right? Which is someone has a sword, and by the will of God, they have that sword.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I have to take up the sword, but it does mean you honor the people who have that sword from God.
Yeah.
And they haven't always done that.
Yeah.
It was very plain between the Rutherford era and the late 20s when he really took over, after he threw Russell out as the slave. The late 20s he really took over, and all the real Russellites left during the next 5 years or so.
Yeah.
And from the 20s to the 1962, you believed he was right. So the honoring the superior authorities was nothing to do with governments. It had everything to do with only honoring Jehovah God as exemplified by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society.
So where people understand it, you're always going to find, even within Christians, those that that will be pacifists, but those that will not be pacifists. But they're going on their conscience. They're going with what they believe is the right thing to do. They're basing it on their own conscience, their own
That's right.
study. So they can exist together in the church.
Yeah.
But you can't have that in the Watchtower. You have to go with one conscience, their conscience.
Their conscience. At any given moment, be prepared to change it.
Yeah.
By the way, in our household, I'm still a pacifist, a committed pacifist, but my son isn't. Max is not. He's, I would say, more pacifistically oriented than most Christians are.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
But he's more nuanced in his approach to it than either of us would be.
and we allow for that. Like we don't kick him out, do we? Because he's not following in Dad's footsteps.
No, we have discussions. Loud discussions. No, we do have discussions.
Not that loud.
Regularly on that. Yeah.
What's our link?
We're going to link to a video, and I really encourage you to listen to this one, where I actually go through Russell's position, his interpretation of Romans 13, 1 to 7, and then Rutherford's, and then what they say now.
Yeah.
So that you can see this double reversal.
And not only that, but you can also see Rutherford's slanderous, I would say malicious and malevolent words about even Russellites who dared to differ with his position on the superior authorities.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say that's the tone we have as witnesses, is if people don't agree with us, we slander them. We just, we can't, they're wrong. Like that. There's no, I'll try and understand your point of view, but I don't agree, which is fine. You can disagree with people without slandering them.
Yeah, so check out the quotes in this. This is based on, I think it's from Rutherford's book Vindication back in the early 30s.
Yeah.
But then there's also a booklet after Rutherford dies and what Nora and friends have to say in a booklet written during the Second World War, where they obviously have the same mind towards everybody else who dares disagree.
Yeah, they held it for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So the link is called Rutherford Defies Churches, Russell, and JW org on Romans 13. Jehovah's Witnesses, as usual, follow the leader.
See you next time.
Yeah.